To find out more about this, I spoke with Noa Burger, Corporate Responsibility Project Manager with the City of London Corporation. Noa manages complex multi-sector partnerships and focuses specifically on enabling best practice in corporate community partnerships and social enterprise procurement. She also account manages a portfolio of over 100 businesses and charities. What is corporate social responsibility?
I think it's really about the relationship that an organisation has with the world outside of it. So it's really about how a business can be responsible and appreciate that commercial gains and societal gains are really interlinked. But I guess it's also used to refer to a particular function within a business. So that might be a department or a team, and very often it's actually just an individual or a voluntary committee who's responsible for influencing wider business decisions.
Now, what are the key areas that come under the umbrella of corporate social responsibility?
So there's traditionally thought to be 4 main pillars to CSR. That's marketplace, which is really looking at your supply chain and ensuring that you're mitigating risks in terms of what you're buying, who you're buying from, what kind of ethical products or not ethical products they might be using, how they're paying their labourers. There's then another area which is your workplace, which really refers to how you treat your staff. So things like employee well-being, mental health, learning and development opportunities. You've then got the environmental side, which is really looking at the impact that your business has on the environment. So things like energy use, business travel, consumption, those kinds of things. And then finally, you've got the community aspect, which is really about how your business engages with the community, local or more widespread than that. And that's often seen as things like employee volunteering programs, pro bono support, staff fundraising, that kind of thing. But I think increasingly people are seeing CSR as something that you can't just limit to 4 areas. And it's really about the way that you act and the way that you think as a business, how you make decisions from that kind of responsible business standpoint.
So what are the drivers behind the growth in CSR in recent years?
I think there's probably generally a larger discourse around sustainability, and that's in the press all the time, whether it's about climate change or how we ensure that our economic recovery is more sustainable and more fair. And I think that you have a few maybe forward-thinking business leaders who start to run with something, and then it starts to create some natural competition. So other businesses start thinking, okay, there's my main competitor, that's what they're doing, how can I differentiate my business? And then I think increasingly there's quite a bit of anecdotal evidence that graduates and more junior staff are really expecting their employers to have a CSR strategy in place.
So what advantages would you say there are to signing up to CSR?
So I think some of it is about competition and differentiation, and more and more as CSR gets pushed through the supply chain, by which I mean clients are asking, when you pitch for a piece of business, how can you demonstrate your values? And CSR is a really interesting way to do that. So it's being seen as a way to make the difference between winning a piece of business or not. I think there's a huge advantage as well from an employee engagement perspective. I think it's such a powerful thing to feel that you work for an employer who shares some of your values and that you feel really cares about your well-being and your development. And we know that a more motivated workforce is also a more productive one. So I think people are really beginning to see that, if they haven't already, that CSR isn't just that good, fluffy, philanthropic stuff. It also is very relevant to your bottom line.
Now, are there any arguments against signing up to CSR?
I think most of the resistance that you get is to do with resource, and that's particularly true for smaller businesses. It's not so much about having a budget, it's about having time, because what you're asking people to do is change the way that they do business, which is a cultural change, and that kind of change takes a long time. But what I recommend is that you start with a small initiative and start to really measure the difference that that makes for you as a business. And then you can really start to build a case for what the positive benefits are, not just for society, but also for you as a business and your bottom line.
Lots of legislation recently has taken up some of the factors that generally come under the umbrella of CSR. Now, is adhering to those legislative obligations akin to having a CSR programme?
No, I don't think so. I think that CSR really starts where the law ends. So CSR really covers the things you do that go beyond legal requirement and beyond compliance, things that you're deciding to do because you believe that it's good for your business and good for your people and good for your other stakeholders, which may include shareholders, customers, or just, the general population.
Now, CSR is seen as it's a voluntary action taken by businesses, yet increasingly there seems to be pressure nationally from the government and from Europe and on an international level for some aspects of it to become mandatory. Now, do you think this is a trend that's likely to continue?
I think that pressure to do CSR will continue to grow, but I'm not sure that legislation will. I think that CSR will continue to be something that a business voluntarily decides to do. But I think in the private sector particularly, most of that pressure will continue to come from clients and customers and employees. It's a little bit different in the public sector or for those organizations that supply the public sector. So in 2013, we saw the Social Value Act being enforced, which now requires all public bodies to consider what social value they can create through their procurement processes. And that is largely seen as quite a weak piece of legislation, but the fact that it's been enforced has really opened up the doors to talking about responsible procurement, and I think that does trickle down to the private sector as well.
Now, the government had a call for views on corporate social responsibility in 2013. What sort of questions were opinions sought on?
I think most of those questions were really about what role the government can take to either regulate CSR or simply to promote it and enable it more effectively. And they were looking to CSR professionals to give their views on that.
And what was the response that was given?
It was very mixed. I think they said there was a fairly equal split between those who favoured more regulation and those who didn't. I think what people's concern was that when you standardize something that has to be relevant for such a diverse community of businesses, so different size businesses, different sectors, operating in very different communities, how do you have a kind of one-size-fits-all? And also, would you end up excluding a lot of the smaller businesses by very onerous sort of reporting requirements and such like? But one thing that was very interesting that came out of it was the role that perhaps local government rather than central government could have on, say, coordinating sectors to address certain issues.
And what direction do you see CSR moving in? Are there any trends or particular focus points which you could tell us about?
So what I've seen at the moment is, as I've mentioned a few times, is a growth in interest in responsible procurement, but also a lot about mental health, in particular in relation to the workforce, which a few years ago you really couldn't talk about at board level in a business. We've also very recently launched the first Institute for Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability, and that's a really big step in terms of professionalizing the field and encouraging people to share best practice and further develop. So that they can be the best and most effective influencers that they can within their individual businesses. So I think that's sort of where I see things going. The dream, which is maybe not just a couple of years ahead of us, maybe it's further down the track, is for CSR not to be a distinct standalone business function, but to be integrated into every business decision at every level.
Why should law firms sign up for CSR? I mean, what's particular for them, and does it matter what size of firm we're talking about?
So I think Law firms are very people-centered businesses. I think the drivers are therefore always going to come either from clients asking about this, what are you doing in CSR? What differentiates you from another law firm that I could go to and take my business to? And then I think your workforce and attracting and retaining the best talent that's out there, which is very important to law firms. I think individual firms will have different issues they want to focus on. It might be about ensuring that you are giving responsible advice to your clients. It might be around diversifying recruitment practices. It may just be about not using so much paper, which we know law firms have a habit of doing. And in terms of your question about size, I think that where size is important is perhaps in the what you do and the how you do your CSR, but the why doesn't change. The reasons for having a commitment to CSR about being a responsible business doesn't matter what size your company is.
And so someone arguing that they're perhaps a single partner firm or two partner firm and not having the resources to pursue CSR in the way you've described, how would you respond to that?
Well, then I think it's about thinking less in terms of initiatives and thinking more in terms of a frame of mind. So no matter how small your business is, you're still making buying decisions every day. Where are you getting your stationery? Who supplies your outsourced accountancy? And think about all those little decisions you make day to day and how you could make them in a way that both reduces any negative impact but also creates positive impact.